Hi everyone, it's Lindy on from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I'm going to show you a brand new set of stamps and dies from Art Impressions, and we're going to be making a mini Christmas twister, and I'll also be showing you how to create this gatefold card and to create this beautiful stenciled background. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got some Lawn Fawn Craft cardstock, and this is a 100-pound cardstock, and this piece measures 5.5 by 8.5, and I'm scoring it at 2 1/8 inches, and then I'm flipping it around and I'll score it again at 2 1/8. So when I fold these two sides in, we'll get a standard A2 size card with a beautiful gatefold in the front. So that's your basic design for the gatefold. So I'm just pressing that out really well with the bone folder, and then we want to create some panels for the front of the card and one for the inside of the card. I'm going to be using some vanilla malt 100-pound cardstock from Lawn Fawn, and I've cut these pieces to 5.25 by 4 inches for that larger one. That'll go on the inside of the card. And then these two front panel cards will be 5.25 inch by 1 3/4 inches. And that'll leave a nice little border of that craft cardstock all the way around. So let's go ahead and grab that larger vanilla malt cardstock. I'm just putting a little temporary tape on my Wendy Vecchi Make Art station just to hold that in place. And then I've got the Winter Sprigs background stencils from Lawn Fawn. This is a 3-part stencil. So you can see they're all labeled part 1, 2, and 3. And each part does a little different part of the design. So we're going to start off with the foliage. I'm placing it in the upper right hand corner of my card panel, just lining that stencil up, and then I'll go ahead and use my magnets to hold that in place. And then we've got 3 different colors of ink: Mowed Lawn, Twisted Citron, and Rustic Wilderness. And these are the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to use a blending brush to apply this ink, and I'm going to start off with that lighter color, that Twisted Citron, and I'm going to do all of those little sprigs in that, and then I'm going to add a little shadowing to that with the Mowed Lawn. To darken up the centers, I'm using the Rustic Wilderness. And I've switched over to a small blending brush. That's the Pinkfresh Studio blending brush, and it's a 1/4 inch round brush. And now what I'm doing is just blending those 3 colors out together a little bit better. Now I've got peeled paint, crushed olive, and forest moss. Let's start off with that crushed olive, and we're going to fill in these other little sprigs. So I wanted my little foliage to have different tones of green to them. You could certainly do them all in one color if you prefer. You don't have to add this additional shadowing if you don't want to. Just kind of play around with these. I just wanted a nice mix of the greenery. And then we'll grab that darkest color and again add some little shadows using that Pinkfresh Studio blending brush. And that little brush just allows you to apply just a little bit of ink, and then you can blend that out. If you get a little too much ink on that blender, you can see that I have a towel there and I'm just brushing off any excess, and then I can continue doing my blending. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of mix and match all those colors that we've already used and finish filling in all of this foliage. Now do keep in mind that all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. So you can see I keep switching back and forth to the size of the blending brush depending on the size of the image I'm using, and also if I'm going to be doing some shadowing. So as I said earlier, we're going to be creating a little mini twister. This is so cute, and we're going to be using the Santa, but this set has several different images, and I will show you those here in a second. And then we're also going to create a little band or a little belt buckle for the front of the card, and that will hold this closed. So now that I've got stencil number 1 complete, you can see how pretty that is. You could certainly just leave it just like that. I'm going to just wipe away any of that green, and then we can place down stencil number 2. It is clearly marked in the upper right hand corner of the stencil that it is number 2, and then you can see through that stencil so you know exactly where to line this up. There are little etched marks on the stencil so you can see exactly where you need to be. So again, I've got that Pinkfresh Studio 1/4 inch round brush. I've got spun sugar and lumberjack plaid. Let's start with that lighter color, and we'll fill in all of these little berries. I'm going to use that lumberjack plaid to add some shadowing to the berries, just to give them a more realistic look. And again, going back to the card, we're going to have that little belt buckle in the front. I don't know, for some reason that reminded me of Santa with his big buckle. So that sort of inspired me to put a little buckle on the front of the card as well. So I'll show you how we did that, because we're going to be using some brand new dies to do that as well. And then we'll add a little sentiment to the inside of the card. So when I'm adding these little shadows, I'm just kind of pouncing that ink on. I'm kind of like pouncing it straight up and down. I don't want to completely cover those little round berries. I just want to add a little shadow. And then for blending, you do want to make sure you keep cleaning off that brush and then go back and do your blending, so that you still get a light and dark area of each of those berries. So once that's all set, we can go ahead and remove this stencil, and then we'll go on to stencil number 3. And look at this. Isn't this just gorgeous? So now I've got stencil number 3. Again, you can see that is marked in the upper right hand corner. And then let me give you a little closer look at the little etchings on these stencils. You can see exactly where you need to line things up. So you can see through that, and it shows you. So if you're not using that upper right hand corner as your positioning, you can certainly easily line these up. So now let's do the last section, and I'm using antique linen and gathered twigs, which is one of my absolute favorite browns. I just love gathered twigs. I use it a lot. It's just got such a pretty shade to it. So with this antique linen, we're going to do all these little pine cones. And this will be kind of the highlight on the pine cones. And then what we'll do is come in with that gathered twigs, just to add a little bit of depth to each of these. And again, I'm going to use that same kind of pouncing motion. And I'm just really going to apply that ink sort of down towards the base of the pine cones, and just kind of tap a little bit up into the pine cone. Again, I don't want to completely cover the antique linen. I just want to create a little shadow. Now for this little section, I am not going to blend. I'm going to leave it just as it is. I wanted these to be kind of rustic-y looking, so I'm just going to pounce that darker color on, and that's it. And look at this. This is just stunning. This on the front of a card with a little sentiment would be beautiful. And then we can do the front 2 panels for the card. I am lining them up right next to each other, so I'm butting them up against each other so that when I put them on the front of the card, they will look like one continuous piece. So what I've done is actually labeled this one the right one and this one the left one. If you do that, you won't get confused later when you go to glue these on. Now I've got the ground espresso, and this is a nice dark chocolatey brown. I'm going to place this all around the edges on this panel and then on the 2 front panels. And that'll just give it a little bit more of a vintage look. And you can see these are all completed. So I'm going to set those aside, and then I'm going to use that same ink and do the edges of the card as well. And just be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to get any ink on the back side of your card. So just make sure you wipe that off, and then you can finish doing your blending. Let me show you what that looks like. And then I did decide to do the inside the same exact way, just to kind of bring that look to the inside of the card as well. So that's all set. Let's grab our Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and these card panels, and we can go ahead and attach these to the card. I'm just centering that, and then I've got the right panel for the right tab on the front of the card. And what's nice about using the glue is it's going to give me a little time to move that around just to make sure that I have a nice even edge all the way around. So now we've got the base of the card created. Let's add a little band. I'm using this as a little belt for the card. And what I'm showing you there is that is from the Art Impressions mini journal template set. And there are other dies included in that set, which I did not realize at the time I was creating this video. So I will list and link that product down below for you so you can take a look at the rest of the products included. Now I've got the Tim Holtz 3D Texture Fades Embossing folder, and this is called Cracked Leather, and it's going to give this beautiful leathery look to our band. So I've got my Spellbinders Platinum 6. I've got the platform, and I've got 2 pieces of cardboard. You can use the directions for your specific machine. This is how I tend to do it. It just works really well for me. And so now you can see that those have that really pretty cracked leather look to them. Now I do need a second one for that smaller piece. I thought I wanted to secure that a little bit better. So we're going to double that up. I don't need to emboss this one, so I'm just going to run it through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. And now we have 2 of those that we can glue together. That'll just give that belt buckle a little bit more stability. I want to place plenty of glue on there, right up to the edges, and then glue these 2 together. Let's go back to the ground espresso, and I'm going to use the small round blending brush again. I'm going to add a little ink to this. I'm kind of just lightly placing the ink over the top, not pressing down real hard. I just want to kind of pick up those high spots. So there's a closer look at those. Let's take a look at the brand new mini Christmas twister set, and this is adorable. There's the little stockings, the Santa that we're using today, a snowman, and the word joy. And all of these match up front to back to create our little spinner. And each of them have the coordinating dies. And off to the right there at the top right, you can see those 2 dies. One is nested inside the other one. And those will create the frame for our spinner today, and the smaller one will also create the opening for the spinner in our card. So we'll be using both of those today. Now I did also want to point out, and there you can see I created the little frame out of some metallic cardstock, and I'll talk more about that later. This one, this die, is not for this mechanism. I just want to show you that it is a separate die, and it's so that you can create your own spinners. It's just so that you can create a spinner using any of the stamps that you have in your collection. So I hope that's clear. But now there's that metallic cardstock that I used to create the frame, and I just thought I'd show you quickly how I did that. I actually created the frame before I die cut the 2 dies apart because I knew it would be evenly spaced. And then I'll show you that then I will separate these 2 dies. And again, because I need that smaller one to create the opening for the card. So we can set that aside for now. Let's go ahead and grab the stamp we're using today. And I'm going to use the little Santa, but of course you could use any of these. Any of these would go really well with the background we created today. I'm using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I've got some Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. I'm going to quickly stamp those, and then with Sugared Almond Pink and the flesh color, we'll color in his cute little face. And I'm using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens to do this, and I'm using the Zig Blender pen to blend out my colors. And now I've got the light gray, and we'll just add a little shadow to his beard and mustache. And then we'll add a little shadow to the trim on his jacket and on that little pom-pom. Now to color in the jacket, I was going to use my zigs, but I wasn't quite sure I had the red that I was looking for. I knew I wanted it to match the background we had already created, so I am going to use my Distress Oxide ink pad. And this color that I'm using here is the Cool Gray number 6. You could certainly use black here, but sometimes I prefer my grays. I know I mention this all the time, but the black in the zigs has a little bit of a purple undertone to it. So I tend to be reaching for the cool grays and the warm grays lately to do my blacks. Now, here's that lumberjack plaid, and this is a Distress Oxide. What I'm going to do is just place a little bit onto my mat, and then with my blender pen, I'm going to pick that up. You could certainly pick it up with a little bit of water on a brush and use it as a watercolor, but I'm going to use the blender so that I get a nice saturation of color, and then I can come back in and add some shadows. I'm just picking up a little bit more of that ink and placing it down. And then if you get too much ink, you can see that I'm just scribbling a little bit of it off onto my scrap paper until I get that nice blending. And if you have your Distress Oxide inks, they're really great for painting and coloring with. So you may want to pull those out and do a little practicing with that because it really is fun. And then you can, again, match that color perfectly to your project. So this lumberjack plaid will nicely coordinate with the little berries that we created. Now I'll do the same exact thing for the back side of the Santa. And here I'm just removing a little bit of ink. I think I got some red up onto that trim. So what you want to do is grab it with your blender pen and scribble it onto your scrap paper until you get rid of it. I did fuss around a little bit, kind of adding some more shadows. You can let it dry just a little bit and then come in with more ink. So now you want to clean that blender pen off really well. And you can see that mine went perfectly clear. So just scribble it on your scrap paper until it goes perfectly clear, because using that ink that way, it will lift some of that ink up into the blender tip. So you do want to clean it off. I've got the coordinating die for my little Santas, and I'm going to run those through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. Now you see when we pop those out, you have the little tabs at the top and the bottom of the Santa for the spinner mechanism. So let's go ahead and glue these together. I've got the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive again, and we'll glue these back to back. Now you could certainly use these little images for other projects. Just cut away that little tab. And now I'm going back to the ground espresso, and I'm going to add a little bit of that ink. I thought the little tabs at the top and the bottom were just a little too bright white. I wanted to make them a little bit more vintage looking. And then you want to flip it over, but you do want to clean off your area before you flip it over so you don't get any of that ink on the back side of your Santa. So now here I've got that frame again, and as I mentioned before, I got that middle part of the frame. So I've got that smaller die, and we're going to die cut the opening to the card. So I'm going to place mine in the upper left hand corner, and I'm going to make sure that those two tabs are nice and straight. So I'm using my Miss T ruler. These are nice. This is a little 2-pack of rulers that you get, and they're perfect for card making, and I just want to make sure that's nice and straight. I did grab some brand new plates to run this through because I didn't want to get any marks on my card since it's, it's all assembled. So then they're nice smooth plates, so I won't get any weird lines or any marks on there. So I ran that through a couple of times because remember, you are die cutting through 2 layers of cardstock. And then I can remove that die, and you can see we have that perfect opening in the card. Let's go ahead and attach that little frame. Now you could attach a frame to the inside of the card as well, but do keep in mind it will tighten up your little spinner. It won't move around quite as freely. So that's something to consider, because here I have 3 pieces of cardstock. So you kind of have to manipulate that spinner a little bit. Move it around a lot just to get it to kind of get moving. Once you kind of break that paper down a little bit, you'll get it moving easier. So you saw that I popped that right in place, and I'll show you that again later because you just want to bend the Santa just a little bit just to make sure he pops right into place. Let's add some glue to the belt buckle, and we're going to add it just to the two ends because you want to make sure that little buckle opens and closes. And I'm going to center those little openings right down the center of the card. So I'm going to put something heavy on that and let that dry completely. Once that was dry, let's add some really pretty pearls. These are from Pinkfresh Studios, and these are the matte gold. So that matte gold will give it, again, more of that vintage look. I'm going to put 2 on each side. Once that's done, I'm going back to that same die set we used before to create the little band, and I'm going to use this sentiment. It says, "Have a holly jolly Christmas," and this is from the Mousey Christmas set. And that's the one we're going to be using there. And this little set is just so sweet. So again, I'm going to use the lumberjack plaid, and I'm going to ink that up and stamp that onto some Kraft cardstock. Now we can go ahead and die cut that with that little die. This is so pretty, this little die. This is great for sentiments. So let's run that through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. And then let's ink around the edges, again going back to that ground espresso. And I'll give you a closer look at that. You can see it has that pretty edge all the way around. So we can glue this to the inside of the card. I thought it would be nice if it was right behind that buckle, kind of centered behind that buckle. I'm just closing half of the card so I can see exactly where that center point is, and then we can glue that down. I did pop that Santa back out because I decided I wanted to add a little bit of that clear wink of Stella to his little pom-pom, the hat, and all the little fur areas. And I did that on both sides. So again, here I can show you how easy this is to pop in. You've got those 2 little notches, and you want to line those up with the notches on the frame. And you do have to bend that just slightly to pop that into place. And then manipulate that a few times just to get it moving. And now you can see how cute this is. So let's take a closer look at the finished card. And these are just so much fun. And that little band, that little buckle, and our beautiful stenciled background. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.